Hi guys, it's Addie here from Whimsy of Things. I am recording this intro after I recorded the rest of the video. So as you can see, I have survived the hurricane that was referenced in the rest of the video just fine. We are going to be looking at these inks today. There are some good ones in here, so let's get started. These are the inks that I had last month. 24 different pens. This is where we were at last month when I did my currently inked video. I've arranged these in order of the pen and ink combinations I liked all the way down to my least favorite. So as a quick review, this entire row of ink right here, in every one of these cases, I loved both the ink and the pen and how it wrote. This I ordered a bottle of. So I have a bottle of this now, and this only didn't get used up because it's in this wider stub, but I really like this ink a lot. The shading in this long knife nib for this red beans and rice was beautiful, and I'm definitely going to do this again. I really liked it in there. This and this are so similar. If I hadn't inked this pen and I'd only inked this pen, this would be much higher. I just prefer the Pennonia slightly more than the Sailor Menu Fuji. But I really like this combination too. Summer Storm and this Flex pen was beautiful. This I didn't think I was going to like. I end up writing with it all the time. This was the surprise of the month. So these are my very most favorites. This is the surprise. This was pretty. I liked it. Didn't reach for it a bunch. The color on these two is kind of similar, the base color. I love Troublemaker Moon River. I don't know. I just didn't really reach for it. The Sport Nib, this black one is a little, it's not super smooth. So I think that's what kept me from writing with it more. This was a pretty purple, but this sheening that comes through on the swatch didn't really come through in here, but it was a nice writer. And this Magnolia Mirage is just so different colored in an Architect nib than it is in a Flex nib. It's crazy. It was still a nice color. These two, I didn't like either of these inks very much, but they're higher up because I did, in both cases, fill them with inks that I liked more that I used up throughout the entire month. So this Fountain Pen Revolution, the Ganymede, I really liked writing with this. It's a nice purpley gray. And I always really enjoy writing with Silver Fox because the shading is quite beautiful. So if we put it like this, that would make more sense. I would maybe even move it higher. And in this case, I didn't really like Bellflower because it's quite dark, but I loved this ink that I put in it. I wrote Gravitas here, ignore that. Just really the shading, gorgeous. I love this. And this would probably, if we just went on this alone, I would say it'd probably go here at least, if not higher. So those are kind of the exceptions. But we started with this, so we'll just keep them down there. Then moving down more, this Art Pen, Private Reserve. It's still one of my favorite grays, even though you can't get any more. And this Art Pen is much more fun to write with than I thought it was. However, I did use up all of this ink and clean the pen, and it's going into storage, though I'm not totally convinced about that at this point. I really like the Triumph Tulip Twinkle from Birmingham Pen Company in this Pilot Parallel, but it is a Pilot Parallel, and not only that, it's a 6mm. I don't use it very often, but I do like this combination. This Ladybug it's a nice red. It has some shading. It's just kind of boring to me for some reason. This section here, right here, we're getting into the just kind of boring section. Just kind of boring. Nice green, just kind of boring. This Purr, I barely reached for because it just doesn't really do much. There's not much shading. It's just kind of boring. This one was nice. But the precision, I don't love writing with it. So I would blame this position more on the pen than the ink. And I could say the same for this. This pen I discovered writes really dry. I'll talk about that more later, how I figured that out. Ended up changing the nib on it, and that helped. But so this and this are both pen issues. And honestly, this one too. This Pilot Falcon, I go back and forth with constantly trying to figure out if I like it or not. The last time I filled it, it had a very light ink in it. And this time I wanted to try something quite dark to see. So we've got, this is the, don't use much. These three are the just kind of boring. And these three are the, it's not you, it's the pen. It's not the ink, it's the pen right here. Actually, this one too. The Damson, it's a nice purple. It's gusty and it does have shading. When this pen wasn't writing really well, I flossed the nib and it helped. So these four are pen problems. This, I think is almost used up. It's just too much sheen for me. You know, it's not terrible, but it's so shiny. And then these two are the bottom of the bunch. I don't like these inks. I don't like this tone of brown. I didn't like how it worked in this pen. It wrote quite dry. This is didn't like the ink, didn't like the pen. This was a big no-go. And it's still, because I haven't used it, because I don't like writing with it, it's still got this color in it. This is a ink issue as well as a just size of the pen issue. I thought about breaking one of my mental rules, de-inking this, and I may still do it. I did find that if I go over the letters more than once, it's legible. But for a pen I reach for so rarely, these two, it's not even really fair because I just don't use them that much. Out of these pens that I had inked last month, I'm going to take out the ones that I re-inked this month and leave the ones that are still inked. For my August pens that I had inked, I have 8, 9, 10. I have 11 pens that I'm carrying over, and these are the 11 pens that are getting carried over. Lamy Safari, Pen BBS, a couple Kavekos, and my Pilot Parallels, and one Flex pen, and all the Wankais. That will fit. There's 8, 9, 10, 11. That means that I have 13 pens that got re-inked or are getting re-inked for September. Yep. So that is basically a brief August overview of my currently inked where I was at last month. I found some new favorites for sure. There were a couple changes from between last month and this month. The one change that I made, and I'm still at 24 total pens, but I did clean this pen out and I'm planning on storing it. However, now that I've done that, I kind of miss it. It's got a nice bouncy medium nib on there that may make an appearance again next month. But for now, it is put into storage. I used up the private reserve ink that was in there, cleaned it out, and it's ready to store. And I got one new pen, this Magna Carta Mag 650. I did a pretty extensive review on it. It's a very fun flex pen, 14 karat gold flex, very unique, smooth flex. That is the one new pen. So I'm still at 24 total pens. I just want to take a brief moment here to talk about the things that I do to keep track of ink. I watched a video from Simone that was talking about different ways to track your currently inked pens and the different systems that she uses. And I actually have 3 systems going at one time. The papers that I do on this currently inked video for you guys are what I mostly primarily do for video purposes. Though I do really like having these little papers. I write information on the back, and I'll show you where I'm storing those when I use them in a second. But I still, in my actual planner, have a currently inked list that is just based by pen. I don't go through this because it's not very interesting, and it doesn't have any information on it as to how well an ink works in a pen. So this is primarily a reminder list for myself if I pick up a pen, because I do have 24 plus pens inked at any point in time, what is actually in the pen currently. So that's the purpose of this. Then I also have this little notebook that I keep track of the inks by the pen, meaning each sheet is a pen, and I put all the inks as I put them in the pen in this list with the name of the ink here, and then some notes about how it did in that particular pen. This is important to me right now, or the reason I'm bringing this up right now is because I had a pen last month. I had put Birmingham Pen Company railroad spike in it, and I mentioned that it was very dry. Well, the last 3 inks that I put in the pen, I mentioned that they're dry. So that tells me that apparently that pen is dry, and it's the only Fountain Pen Revolution pen I have that acts like that. So after seeing this, I took one of my other pens. So this is the one that I'm talking about right here. I took one of my other pens, this Himalaya, that I know writes well and that I don't have any issues with. And when I finished up the ink that was in it this last month, which was Ladybug, I put Birmingham Pen Company Railroad Spike in it. I put the same ink into this pen, this known good writing pen, and it performed perfectly fine. So that really told me that this pen had an issue. So what I did with this pen is I took out the nib. I replaced it with a different nib that I had laying around, and I wanted to try that first just to see if it made a difference. And it appears to have resolved the problem because the railroad spike was still in there. It started writing better. There was just a little bit left. And then the Firebox was writing well. But that is why I ended up putting the same ink into 2 different pens last month. So this pen still has railroad spike in it. This pen now has Firebox in it. But that's what this book is for, is to document how each particular pen acts. And I don't show this on camera either because it doesn't really have big swatches of color. And then I picked up this binder. I'm gonna make something, but this just worked. And then I got these little business card sleeves. As it's not the current month anymore, I'm gonna put these in here and with the notes on the back. And if I end up with the same ink in multiple pens, I will put all the sheets in here. Right now, I've got them loosely sort of, because I only just started doing this, by color. And I think I'll stay doing that. And then like there's, you can see on here, the refill. Is this like aesthetically my jam? No, I'm not really into like plastic sheets and binders. So it might change. I mean, that's what we do. We try different systems. We see what works. We change. I do think that this is a good way to just get them grouped up. So that is where these go when it's not the current month. While it is the current month, they live in this little Daiso box. Primarily wanted to talk about that in relation to fixing this. And then I also, if we want to talk about pen repairs, flossed the nib on this little Wankai. This is a TWSBI Precision. This is one that I switched the nib on recently from a stub to a broad. It takes me a while to use this pen up. I don't reach for it, and broad points, even though they do use a decent amount of ink, do not go through ink as quickly as flex pens. And that's why you are continually seeing lots of flex pens every month, because they just go through ink. So I know the people that really enjoy fine or extra fine pens, it's frustrating to try to use up a pen full of ink because it seems like that would take quite a while. I know I have that experience with that Pilot Falcon I have. In this pen, to commemorate this ink, which is now discontinued, I put in the Pilot Iroshizuku Kosomosu. It's a very nice medium pink that is no longer available. Well, it's discontinued. You may still be able to find it in different places, but it is on the chopping block, as it were. So let's see what this looks like. All right, let's just try this again since I had a weather alert on my phone. You hear rain in the background. I am playing with fountain pens to avoid thinking about hurricanes at the moment. So anyway, we have a TWSBI. It's really a shame they're discontinuing this ink. And I think, if I remember right, they're discontinuing 2 different pinks. And this one is bright without being fuchsia, and it's got some nice character to it. It's sad. I'm kind of sad about this one. Not as much as Kirisami, which is their gray, but it's a bummer. I don't have a bottle. All I have is this little sample, and I don't know if I'll panic, try to find a bottle. I'm probably going to not, but it's sad. Kind of have a pink that I'm attached to at the moment though, so but it's a good one. It's very pretty. It's just like a nice, clear, strong pink. So that's the TWSBI Precision. I'll get to live with this pink for a while because, like I said, I don't go through ink very fast in this pen. It does write very nicely in this broad, and I was on the fence about this last month, but it's been writing very nicely. See if I can get this filmed before the power goes out. It's a race. The next pen that I'll talk about is this Himalaya version 2. It is the pen that I swapped out the nib on because after observing about 5 or 6 ink changes in it, I found that it was consistently writing very dryly. And I wanted to just swap out the nib because I had an extra already before I messed with the feed or anything else. So this pen now, this month, has Birmingham Pen Company Firebox in it. I'm leaning towards warm reddish browns this month, probably because I am wanting fall, even though we don't get much of a fall around here. This ink, I really thought would be more red. I thought that it would be a dirty red, darker red. I was not expecting it to be this brown at all. So that was kind of interesting. But as you can see, it's really a good shader. And I do like that. And I have liked browns this month, so it's always good. So in the swatch, it's quite brown. And it's not even a red brown as much as it is an orange-based brown, at least while it's wet. Of course, Birmingham Pen Company inks, as they dry, can change to a completely different color, really, honestly, which is part of the fun, but also hard to make initial snap judgments on. And I do it all the time anyway, and I really should try to stop. All right, the next pen that we will talk about is Fountain Pen Revolution Jaipur version 2 with an Ultraflex nib in it. And this pen has Birmingham Pen Company Huckleberry, which is a bluish purple. It's darker. I am not sure about this ink, at least not in this pen. The first time I filled it, all the ink came out of the nib. And when I've had that happen before with these, I've found that what I usually need to do is take it apart, clean it, and add some silicone grease to the piston. Sometimes like it's just not making an airtight seal. And generally when I do that, it solves the issue and I don't have any problems. Don't see any cracks anywhere in the pen, but you can definitely see there's been some ink in the cap. So I did that. I took it all apart and I re-silicone greased the piston and I filled it with the same ink and it's still doing it. I am not blaming the ink. It could still be an issue with the pen, but that's going to be a problem. I don't foresee this staying in there, but I'll swatch it anyway, and I'll let you guys know next month what ends up happening with it. But because it's still globbing out, even after taking it apart, I will probably empty it and then try to fill it with an ink, a different ink, and see if it's still an issue. A different ink that I have more of, because when it comes out the end and just blobs up everywhere, I feel like I waste a ton of ink. Additionally, I feel like this color is one for maybe a dry writing broad, because it's quite dark, and any flex pen that puts down a decent amount of ink, you're not going to get any of the character that's in this color. This one's kind of a mess. I'm going to have to get back to you on that one. But they can't all be perfect, and I like to share the things that don't work sometimes. The next pen that we are going to do is this Fountain Pen Revolution Jaipur version 2. This is the pen that I keep gray ink in primarily to do a lot of writing. When I had it last month, I had put Kaweco Smoky Gray in it and decided this is not a great gray for flex pens. I keep forgetting that. But since then, I also inked it with Colorverse Ganymede, which is a really pretty purplish gray. I used that completely up. And I also inked it with Diamine Silver Fox, which is a very nice shading, lighter medium gray. In the month, I went through 3 fills. This is now the 4th fill. And I inked it with Pennonia. This is Storm Cloud Viharfelhö. That's as close as I'm going to get. I'm so sorry. I tried to look it up. This is a Hungarian ink. I feel like this is actually, probably needs to dry a little bit still, but I feel like it's showing a bit darker than what it's showing when I do writing with it. I don't know, I keep crowding that side so much with these. Just start over a little bit more. Anyway, so that's Pennonia. Just say Storm Cloud for right now. Pennonia Storm Cloud. Very nice gray. And the next pen that I used up this month was this Hongdian Long Knife N23 Year of the Rabbit pen. Now we have put in Kuretake, Meiji, Ebicha. I used it up, so I don't have a sample to show you guys. So we'll go ahead and write over further this time. Long knife nib is somewhat like an architect, in case you haven't seen any of my other videos. It's a nice brown with some really, really good shading. I'm gonna have to steal a little ink from here for this swatch. Let me just push some out. There we go. So I call this a brown, but it almost borders on a red. It's especially in the shaded bits here. It reads as brown, but it's very red toned brown. I actually really enjoy every ink I've tried from the Kuretake line. They have nice shading. All the ones that I've tried have a really nice shading, and they're saturated. They're just beautiful inks. So that's Ebicha in the Hongdian N23. The next pen that I'm going to show the ink in is this Magna Carta Mag 650. It's a new pen this month, and I just did a review of it. If you haven't watched a review of this pen yet and you're interested at all, I'll put a link up top. And the color that I have in here is Birmingham Pen Company Antique Aubergine. It's a purplish gray. So let's see how close it is to the Colorverse Ganymede. It actually looks less, just a little more reddish tone than the Ganymede. Like a violet-y tone to that. But let's see what it does in a swatch. I am seeing some nice shading and a little bit of haloing from this ink. I feel like haloing is somewhat common with Birmingham Pen Company inks. And the swatch is showing me that it is more of a reddish or pink, almost toned gray than purple. Yeah, it's quite red. It's got quite a reddish or a darker pink tone to it, but it does have some shading and a little bit of haloing and some spots. That's it. It's still gray though, but not purple, more red, almost brown. So they're quite different, even though they're both gray, and they're both about the same value darkness wise. The next pen and ink combination we have for this month is another Fountain Pen Revolution pen. This is a Himalaya version 2, and in this I have Birmingham Pen Company's Tiger Lily. I have tested this in a broad nib, and I liked it quite a bit. It had good shading, so I wanted to see how it does in a flex pen. And this one is the one that has the titanium flex nib that I took from my Gravitas pocket pen. So this is a little bit different flex nib than the other Fountain Pen Revolution pens have. It's a pretty orange. It is not showing as much shading in the flex pen as I remember it showing in the broad. But as far as oranges go, it's bright without being neon, and it's not too light. And it does the crazy green thing that Birmingham Pen Company inks do. Always do the swatch. It's pretty saturated. It's got just a tiny little bit of a grungy look to it without being dirty really looking. It's a nice orange. We'll just see if any shading shows up when it dries, but right now it looks like it's just pretty straightforward without any sheening or other properties. The next pen is the Fountain Pen Revolution Jaipur version 2, one of my 2 blue pens. This one is the one without the clip. For the clip I took off. The ink that's in here, I completely used up the sample as well. And it is Colorverse Massive Storm, which is a very pretty ink that I've tried in an Architect. So I am now trying it in a flex pen. So that's like a very green leaning blue-green and more on the darker side. And I need to steal ink from the pen because I do not have any sample left. Don't think. Do I not have a speck left in there? Ah, I do. I have a speck. Okay. I won't have to steal it from the pen then. Should be just enough to all right, let's spread this about. If you've watched me before, you know I've got a few little mental issues with Colorverse inks. We don't always get along. I feel like everybody's got that one ink brand that just doesn't quite work for them. And for me, it's Colorverse. But this might be my favorite Colorverse ink so far. I really like that green, the dark green, spruce green, blue color. And I think that the shading is quite pronounced, even in a flex pen, and that can get a little sketchy with how much ink it lays down. But this is up there. If it's not my favorite Colorverse ink, it's got to be in the top 5. This is like almost a bottle for me. The next pen that I re-inked this month is my Pilot Vulcan, and this one does not get inked very often because I don't use it a whole lot. Last time I filled it, I tried doing a darker ink, and it had Birmingham Pen Company's bearing grease in it. I really like that ink a lot. This month, I decided in my Pilot pen, I'm going to use a Pilot ink, and I've inked it with Iroshizuku Kon-peki, which is a very pure, bright blue. The time that I most enjoyed writing with this pen was when I had Dokdo in it by Colorverse, which is a bright bluish green. So I think leaning towards more of a bright ink would be the way to go. So maybe not Kon-peki necessarily, but that's heading in the right direction. The other option that I've considered with this pen is just to stick black ink or dark ink in it and just have it be my cheap paper pen, since it is one of the only fine point pens that I have. Anything that I write with this could handle a little bit of feathering better. So that might be where it ends up. Kon-peki is a classic for a reason. It's a pretty blue. It's not too dark. It's not too light. It shows some sheening in some pens. It's just solid. It's a solid ink. It's also not too wet, not too dry. I did get under the tape here a little bit this time, but that's okay. So that is Iroshizuku Kon-peki. This pen, on the other hand, comes up almost every month. Since I changed the nib out that was in it to an Architect, I find it very enjoyable to write with. I find it very comfortable to write with. And more importantly than either of those two things is that I have a converter in here, and the ink capacity for this pen is quite small. I don't mind though. I like being able to go through more inks quickly. If I were carrying this as a daily carry, I would probably use cartridges and try to fill them, but for what it is, I like it. And in this pen, I have Birmingham Pen Company's Emerald Fusion, which is one of their sheening inks. And I can already see that that is going to be a serious sheener. The Birmingham Pen Company sheening inks do not play around, but I feel like I like this one a little bit better because the sheen is very similar to the ink color. So as opposed to the super sheener that I don't write with as much, the Quantum Teal, this one I don't enjoy as much because it's teal ink with a pink sheen. And because they're so opposite and because the sheening is so strong, it looks like a pink ink to me. This has got very strong sheening from what I'm seeing so far, but the sheening is a greenish gold. And because it's close to the color of the ink, I am less put off by it. Sort of olivey forest darker green. And their sheeners just look like metal. And this is very saturated. Goodness. I must want to pull some of that ink off. Let's actually grab a Q-tip and maybe try absorbing just a little bit in a section. It just might be so saturated that it doesn't matter. All right, so that is the Birmingham Pen Company Emerald Fusion. That's a sheening green ink with a goldish olive green sheen. This is the Akaku with the Regalia Cross Flux nib, and last month I had Birmingham Pen Company's Bellflower in it. And I also used Kuretake Iroshizuku. This ink was beautiful in this pen. It really actually worked well, and there was really nice shading. So I was quite pleased with that. And I think I may order a bottle of this ink, because I have quite a few blues. Okay, thunderstorm. I have quite a few blues, but this one's got a little more green than most of the ones I have. And there, flicked the power. So doing good. This is an Iroshizuku pen. It has a Regalia cross flex nib on it, which is the most wide flexing pen that I have. It is quite a massive line variation with this. And the ink that I have in here is the Diamine Aurora Borealis. It's a similar color to what I had in it before, but it's a little darker. I love this color in this pen, and I love the shading. Really, really nice. It's a little fussy. It's not as nice writing-wise as last month. It does get a little grumpy if I go just even a little bit too fast. But it's not unusable, so I'll keep using it. I won't change it out. But it's sad because the color is really, really pretty, but just a little bit fussy in this pen. Gave myself no room again for the swatch. I have to start putting lines on there. A little bit of feathering too. It's not a 10 out of 10 pen and ink pairing, but it is pretty enough that I don't mind. And I can't, the ink will be done in a couple pages of writing anyway, so I can live with it for that long. All right, so this is where we ended up. I made a little mistake earlier. I believe I pulled this and said it was empty, but it's not. This still has a dragon in it. So I ended up inking 11 pens. And again, I've arranged them sort of in a most excited, least excited arrangement. This Colorverse Massive Storm, I don't know. It's just beautiful. And for a Colorverse ink to strike me that way, that says something, because generally that's kind of my pet peeve ink brand. I love this color. It's this beautiful, really green leaning blue. It's dark, but still has shading. It's just gorgeous. I love this color. This pen is pushing this color up more for me, but I am a sucker for grays, and this purple leaning gray I'm really a fan of. And both of these work really well in the pen. This, again, the Hongdian I love writing with, and this is another great shader in there. So I imagine that I will be using this quite a bit. This is just a prettier pink than I remember. It's just so clean. I mean, it's not a fall color, so it's sort of sticking out a little bit. It's definitely a spring, like Easter color, but it's just bright and cheerful, and it writes so well in this TWSBI. And with all of the TWSBI hate I've thrown around, it's nice to have just something pleasant to write within there. This, I don't think, is doing this color justice, and I did not get a big enough swatch because I keep doing it too small. But this gray is just beautiful. It has some of the nicest shading I've seen in gray, almost to the point of it's almost too much shading, which is weird for me to say. It gets a little streaky almost, but this is a beautiful ink, and I'm very excited about it because my previous most favorite gray was a Dominant Industry gray, and it's gorgeous. It's downpour, really, really beautiful. But Dominant Industry ink is quite expensive. And with the amount of writing I do with this particular pen, I really was looking for something more affordable. I mean, I refilled this pen 4 times last month, so I'm excited about the prospects of this. This is almost gone. It's a beautiful color, and I love writing with this pen too. And this, I still love the color. The pen is just not really my favorite for it. It's a slightly dry ink and that pen is a little scratchy. Love this color, 1.5 stub, just don't write with it as much. This color is quite different in a flex pen. I still really like it. It's so different from this pink that it's right by. I need to reach for it more. This I'm kind of excited about. The color's very pretty in here. It's still very fine, but I'm going to stick with it and see. This is not the color I was expecting. It's far more brown, but the shading's beautiful. So this one might grow on me. This Tiger Lily, really pretty. It's quite yellow. The color itself, I'm not really a fan of, but I think it's a good color. It's much more legible than these two. I love this color. It's not working very well in this pen. So I'm going to just fight through it, but I don't think I'll use this ink in this pen again. And I don't really want to put white lightning in it or anything because it seems to be okay in other pens. So this is a pretty color. Just, I don't know, got a lot of these bluish greens. But I do like this pen and I do feel like it writes well. It's comfortable. Just in a Pilot Parallel, too big. The swatch is kind of gross. It kind of got gummy almost. The ink itself doesn't though. It's kind of interesting how it's a green. The sheen on it makes a lighter green color. I have a feeling this one might move up a little bit, but it's pretty heavy sheener, so I'm not sure. This is kind of boring, but I'm going to try to reach for it more. This is also kind of boring. It is writing much nicer now. This I think is almost done. And again, it's just a really, really heavy sheener, but I've used it quite a bit for titles. And I do like how this pen writes. So this could potentially be up a little bit. Just kind of boring. This doesn't have a swatch because this is the Railroad Spike that I refilled last month just to test out to make sure it wasn't the ink that was causing the pen to be dry. It's almost black. It's not super exciting to write with. I'll use it up. This, it's working okay. You need to write over everything twice. This is a serious problem. There's something either wrong with this pen or with this ink. So I need to figure this out. But I don't even want to pick this up right now. This is an issue. I'll have to do troubleshooting on this. And I do not like this ink. I wonder how much I have left because I really don't like it. It is probably, I need to just use it. It's not going to last much longer. The good or bad thing about Kavekos is that they just don't have that huge of an ink capacity when you use a converter. So if you put an ink in there that you're not a huge fan of, you really don't have to live with it for too long. So in any case, there are my September currently inked pens. What do you guys think? Are any of these colors ones that you're interested in? I'm starting to lean more fall, but I did have to get that one in there. I hope you guys have a wonderful week. I apologize again about any hurricane noises in the background. I am hanging out with you guys instead of being stressed. So thank you for your company. I hope you guys have a wonderful week and I'll see you next time. Bye. Get through the hurricane okay too? Did. I know you did because you're a good boy, right? You're a good boy. You're just a good boy.